On a coal phase out in India, I'm Arhan Agrawal, the founder and CEO of Ecosphere. Ecosphere is a tech company which works on the environment and provides other companies with environmental solutions and offers technology to help protect the environment. So let's get started with this presentation. So, what does a coal phase out mean? So, coal happens to be one of the most carbon intensive fossil fuels, and phasing it out is a key step to achieve the emission reduction is needed to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius as stated in the Paris Agreement. A coal phase out means regularly reducing the amount of coal being used in a country, state, or city for purposes such as electricity generation, large scale heating, transportation, and so on over an extended period of time until no coal is used in the country. It also means that regularly reducing the coal production and imports in a country, state, or city till the coal production and imports reach zero. So this basically means that throughout a given period of time, we say 5 years, 10 years, and so on, the amount of coal being used in a country keeps on going down, whereas the coal being produced and coal being imported keeps on going down until it reaches an absolute zero. So, what are some of the benefits of a coal phase out? So, the biggest benefit and the most obvious one is reduction in atmospheric carbon dioxide. When we burn coal, it produces a lot of carbon dioxide because coal is basically carbon and produces like for every one molecule of coal, it produces one molecule of carbon dioxide. So, with the amount of coal being used in India, that is a lot of carbon dioxide. A decrease in atmospheric pollution. So this is pretty obvious. It relates to the first one. Everyone can figure out how, as the CO2 decreases, the atmospheric pollution comes down as carbon dioxide happens to be one of the most important greenhouse gases. Also, coal tends to produce other gases such as sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and so on, which also contribute to atmospheric pollution. The decrease in the cost of raw materials. So, okay, this one is kind of interesting. So, when you shift from a coal-based economy, especially when in electricity generation, the way this works out is that you tend to shift to a renewable source of energy, such as solar energy, wind energy, and so on. So you don't really have to buy raw material for these sources of energy since it's already available. I mean, you can't purchase sunlight at the end of the day. However, for a coal-based economy, you need to purchase coal, or you need to mine coal, which also costs money. So it comes a major decrease in cost of raw materials, as you can say out here, and increased investment in renewable sources of energy. So this might not look like a very good thing, but it is actually a very good thing. As the increased investment in these sources of energy, renewable ones, means better technology being used to help A, save the environment, and B, produce more energy at lesser cost, since the no raw materials thing comes in out here. A major benefit of a coal phase out is coal regeneration. This is a pretty known fact that we do not have enough coal with us, and coal is getting over very fast, and that is a major problem a lot of countries are facing. Around 2050, the coal is supposed to get over in this world, and after that, we are in for a major problem. However, if we stop using coal and start phasing it out, and we stop, what's going to happen? We are going to have an supply of coal already there and more coal in the formation. So I know it takes long time for coal to be formed, but if we are not using any coal, then we have a reserve of coal lying for emergencies, and coal is being formed over the next 100 200 years, which is quite beneficial for us. An increase in jobs and decrease in unemployment. So this one might not make sense to everyone, but this is actually there, and I'll be explaining this a lot more further on also. But the basic thing is that to phase out of coal, all those plants will shut down, and a lot of renewable energy parks new come up, such as solar parks, wind parks, and a lot more projects will be set up. And this requires engineers, laborers, management, and so on, transportation workers, which provides an increase in jobs and decreases unemployment. And additional inflow of cash. So this is not applicable in India, but it is applicable on an international basis. So how this one works out basically is that if you're living in Europe, so this is the biggest example there is, the thing known as the EU ETS. So this is basically a carbon trade scheme where as you keep on, you have a certain allowance of carbon credits given to you, which you can spend, and if you go above that value, you have to pay money. So the way this works out that if you are shifting to a coal-based, a coal-free energy generation, you are really decreasing your carbon emissions. That means you have an excess of carbon emissions with you, which you can sell to other countries and make money. So this is quite beneficial to why this can't happen in India, but hopefully someday we'll be a part of a carbon trading system, and this will work out for us. So a coal phase out around the world. So this is just a list of countries that have promised to go on a coal phase out. So Germany had originally wanted a coal phase out by 2030, but then they had stopped this plans of coal phase out in 2020, early 2020. They have again stated their plans of a coal phase out by 2038. By 2035, if possible, they have put in many checks in place, three checks to be precise, in place to see if a coal phase out by 2035 is possible. France has an ambitious target of a coal phase out by 2023. Canada has a target of a coal phase out by 2030. So does Finland. Most of the other European countries also have a target of a coal phase out by 2030. Some are like around 2028, 2030, 2032, but it's mostly around 2030. And Belgium. So I had not forgotten to put the dates on Belgium. Belgium is an interesting case out here. Belgium has already achieved a coal phase out as of 2016. So that means for the past 4 years, Belgium has not been using any coal. That is quite impressive. Now, I know many people say that it was possible in Belgium, quite easily possible in Belgium to be precise, because the population of Belgium is quite less, a small country, easy. I agree that is a major benefit for them, which might not be a case in India. But the thing is, Belgium still took it upon themselves to stop using coal. They put policies in place, and India also has to do the same if it has to go coal free and help protect the environment too. So yeah. So some important statistics for India. So energy from coal. This is current for 2020. 228,901 megawatts of energy is produced by coal. That is around 53.58% of the energy produced in India. So we have around 120 coal power plants in India. There are a lot more though, but this is the large power plants are basically put up, which contribute to major sources. You have some smaller power plants, so this around 150 this goes up to. So energy on renewable sources, 87,669.19 megawatts. This is around 23.63% of the total energy produced in India. So as you can see out here, this is less than half of what's produced by coal. This is not a good ratio. Upcoming coal power plants in India. So they don't have a total number on it, but this is what's being planned and what's under construction as of now. So total capacity that the plan is to put up of coal power plants in India in the next coming future, near future, is 66,125 megawatts, which is a lot. This is not a good situation we're heading towards, and steps need to be taken to prevent this. A projected carbon emission of coal plants for 2020-2021 in India, it is somewhere between 714.976 to 914.68 million tons. This is in layman's terms a lot. So you can see out here written 3,524 billion euros. So this basically means that, so what I've basically done out here is I've taken the EU ETS values as of 17th July, and I've calculated that how much would India have to pay if it produced this much if it were part of the EU ETS. They're 3,524 billion euros. Of course, India would not have to pay this much. It's stupid to think of that. But it basically they would have a certain number of credits available with them, due to which they would not have to pay so much. But India is still in excess. If you look at the Paris Agreement and see what our carbon emissions should be and what we are at due to coal, they would have to pay around 10 to 20 billion euros, somewhere between that, depending on the rate of the time of payment. But yeah, so that is a lot of money being wasted if we were part of a system like that. Lucky for us, we aren't yet. So you can see a basic thing out here, a global coal power. So as you can see this in this graph out here, this thick line, the more prominent one, that is India. As you can see, it's increasing. Most of the other countries seem to be decreasing at this point. India is still increasing. Of course, there's this one out here which is going a bit too high. That is China. So that's not really important. But okay, China is the only country in the world which are our size is performing worse than us in reducing the coal efficiency. So as you can see in this map out here, this map is 29. So this basically shows all the coal power plants in India. So as you can see that coal power plants seem to be prevalent almost throughout the country, and more are being set up also throughout the country. So this is pretty obvious, but most of the electricity provided to our houses via grids and industry via grid comes from coal power plants. So it's pretty obvious to be everywhere. So you can see that it seems to be highly concentrated towards the east, towards Bangladesh area. So that's because just a fact. It's not really important, but yeah, that's because that's where the Jharia coal mines are present. India's largest coal mines, if I'm not wrong. And there also happen to be a lot of inland waterways out there, which provide for the fast, cheap, and accessible transportation of coal to all these power plants. That's why even when you see when most of the power plants which are coming up happen to be in that region. So this is something interesting I felt that I could show everyone out here. So what does the coal phase out look like? So this is kind of interesting. So this is what happens when a country decides to go into a coal phase out. So first of all, no new licenses are given for coal-powered power plants. Quite obvious, you need to reduce the power plants. You cannot have new ones coming up. A regular retirement of old coal-powered plants. Right. This is again pretty obvious that all the power plants you have which are currently working on coal need to be shut down one by one. So this usually works in a way that the earlier power plant which you built earlier and use old technology are shut down first, and then the new ones are shut down right towards the end. Increased investment in renewable energy sources, like I mentioned before, from coal, you need to shift somewhere. You tend to shift towards renewable sources. So you need to increase your investment in these sources. A major decrease in coal imports, kind of obvious. Set up a large number of solar and wind power parks, biofuel plants, tidal power plants, and nuclear energy plants. So nuclear energy plants are a bit debatable, but yeah, even these should technically be set up so to provide a faster coal phase out, a faster shift from coal. Incentives and deadlines for current coal powered power plants to shut down. This is kind of important because why would a current power plant want to shut down unless they have been given some incentive to shut down? They have been forced to shut down. This is important. A strong policy aimed at a coal phase out. Right. So this is kind of obvious, but it should be there. You can't really do something without this. A periodic checks to observe if the targets are being met on time and if an earlier phase out is possible. So this is also what Germany has done. They have kept in three review checks, basically you can say, to check that if a coal phase out is possible by 2035 instead of 2038. This is quite interesting out here. So, yeah. So substitute energy sources. Solar energy. Solar energy is one of my favorite sources of energy. It's quite efficient. So the current capacity in India of solar energy, the current that's been produced is around 35,120 megawatt. As you can see, compared to coal, this is nothing. However, here's a good thing. By 2022, the government has a target of producing how much it is 100,000 megawatts of solar energy. They have planned $100 billion investment in for this. This is coming. This is good. This can help us move away from the coal energy. The only problem with this is that this is not enough as of now, because the biggest one in India is we have a growing population. We are shifting into industrial country now. We are becoming more developed, so we need more energy supply. So this still means that we have to increase our coal supplies. We need to increase our solar energy more, well, more drastically to be honest, while decreasing our coal energy. So this is going to, it is the second cleanest form of energy suitable for barren regions. So I don't think I should club them together, but so solar energy is the second cleanest form of energy. Cool. And it's suitable for barren regions such as the Rajasthan deserts out there, the Thar desert. So it's quite suitable to set up solar power plants out there, solar parks, since there's really you can't really do too much vegetation in the Thar, so it's pretty much barren region and it's not being used for much. So and it has a lot of sunlight coming on, a lot of heat, a lot of sunlight. That's a it's the Thar. Anyway, so you can set up a large scale power plants out there which can capture a lot of energy. So here's a sort of a drawback. Major developments are required in solar energy storage. Right now, you can only store around 30 to 35% of solar energy that's been generated. That is not enough for us. We really need to work, develop, put investments in the solar energy storage to increase the efficiency. I missed this point. So, large scale setups are possible in Rajasthan and it's quite suitable out there. It's quite beneficial to us. So many schemes are already present in India for private organization to shift to solar energy. Even homes can shift. They provide you many incentives to shift to solar panels, and a strong centralized scheme to create large solar power is required. So okay, so the only way India can really move away from coal is to set up large power plants and parks, such as we have major coal power plants right now, of other renewable source of energy, such as solar energy. So I'm not saying that the way people and organizations shift to solar energy by putting up their own panels, it's bad or it's not efficient. It is efficient. After all, every panel you put up, you're decreasing somewhat of the energy that's been produced from coal. So this is important. But even if every house in India shifts to solar energy totally, they still cannot produce enough energy to totally phase out coal. That's why the government really needs to work out here and put up large investments and large solar parks. So as you can see, this map of India is a bit blurry, but the dotted line out here shows the Tropic of Cancer. As you can see, almost half of India lies in the tropical zone. That means it tends to have around 10 to 12 hours of sunlight, average sunlight throughout the year. Most of the part. Of course, in the north you have a bit of problems, especially in Punjab, Rajasthan region, Punjab, Haryana region, Himachal region, and all, JNK of course, where the winter is quite severe. So your uh, solar energy decreases being produced in the winter months and monsoon months also, but it can work throughout the other times. Especially in Rajasthan now, Rajasthan tends to get a lot of sunlight. So it's quite beneficial out there because a lot of sunlight. Plus, it barely gets any rain. The winters aren't that severe out there. It since it gets a lot of sunlight that time, so it's quite beneficial as you can produce solar energy almost throughout the year in Rajasthan, except maybe a few days. Almost 3 region can produce solar energy. Another region to produce solar energy in India is basically below the Tropic of Cancer in the Deccan Plateau region. So it's surrounded by the Eastern and Western Ghats and lies on the leeward side of the Eastern and Western Ghats. That due to that you get very less rainfall out there. It's in the tropical zone, so there's a lot of sunlight throughout the year, high temperatures. So it's quite suitable for producing solar energy. That's a major investment area that should be worked on. Let's shift to wind energy. So the current capacity in India that's being produced is around 32,000 to 35,000 of megawatts of energy is being produced by wind. The total capacity in India is around 302,000 megawatts. This is a lot. $100 billion investment is required to reach this capacity. Maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, but on average, $100 billion investment is required for this. So, wind energy is the cleanest form of energy and is suitable for all windy regions. Large scale setups near the coast are more suitable. So this is basically because on the coast you have your land and sea breezes formed due to the uneven heating of the land and sea, due to which it really benefits us. So there are two types of wind energy farms. One is offshore plants and one is onshore plants. So if you literally put both of them in a in a coastal area, it's quite beneficial as during the day the onshore plants work, whereas during the night the offshore plants work and help in producing electricity. So due to this, throughout the day you can produce electricity, and since most people have seen the coastal regions tend to be quite windy, so it's quite suitable out there. So major development is required in wind energy efficiency. So wind energy is not that efficient because we aren't able to capture all that energy we are creating, and there are other problems also that weather conditions. It really depends on weather conditions. So we really need to work on this to make it more suitable for large scale energy generation. So there's a major point in that there's a lack of any schemes and policies for implementation on large scale wind energy farms. So without any of these policies and schemes, like you have some for solar energy, not enough, but some out for wind energy, you barely have anything. Due to which people aren't really keen on setting up solar energy plants. So that is a major problem we need to address right now. Next, you have the Jaisalmer Wind Park in India. Is the largest wind energy project in India. It's also the second largest wind energy farm in the world. So that's quite impressive. But we need to put up more of these around the world. So as you can see, India has a huge coastline. Then you start at Gujarat and keep on going. You have the Gulfs out there. Then you go throughout. You go down to Kanyakumari and come back up towards Bangladesh on the east, west to east. We have a huge coastline. And if we start setting up wind energy farms all over the place, we can produce a lot of energy. A lot of energy. And what even considering a lot of windy regions in the hilly regions, they're quite windy. So there needs to be some development done in wind energy technology for that. But once that development is done, which is already underway up to a decent extent, a lot of energy can be produced from higher altitudes. As you know, right? The keep on going higher, the wind tends to increase. So it's quite beneficial for us that way. So now let's move to tidal energy. The current capacity of India for tidal energy is just 8,500 megawatts, which is quite less considering the fact that we have a coastline of 7,516.6 kilometers, which is like one of the largest coastlines in the world, if I'm not wrong. So the best part about tidal energy is that no requirement of raw material at all, like wind energy and solar energy also too. And it's the best thing about it does not depend on weather conditions like solar energy and wind energy. So solar and wind, like I explained before, depend on weather condition. What happens tidal energy works on the periodic rise and fall of tides. So you put up a tidal energy plant, you get a high tide and a low tide twice a day. You get it. It's like non-compliance. You get it. That's the way the world works. and that way you can produce set up tidal energy plants along the coast. But yeah, there's a continuous source of energy, like it is explained, due to the periodic rise and fall of tides. Like wind energy, there's a lack of schemes and policy in India for implementation of large scale or any scale tidal energy plants. So Gulf of Cambay produces the majority of India's tidal energy, around 7,500 megawatts. It is followed by the Gulf of Kutch, again Gujarat, Maharashtra region, and followed by the Gangetic Delta. So it's quite less. Best part about this, no carbon emission after setup of tidal energy plants. So solar energy and wind energy tend to have a bit of carbon emission due to the way they work. It's quite less compared to coal, but they still have that. But tidal energy has no carbon emission after the plants are set up. It's quite impressive. So I'm just giving you an example of the course, how big it is. So as you can see, the main regions where most of our tidal energy comes from, Gulf of Kutch, Gulf of Kambat or Cambay, and the Gangetic Delta. As you can see, like 95% of our coastline, we are doing nothing out there. So that's quite sad, and we should, the government should come up with projects to put up tidal energy plants throughout the coast. This will really help us move away from coal at a much faster rate, and this will become more economically viable since suddenly the cost of mining of coal and all this will go down drastically. And this thing about these plants is that, especially titanium plants, you set them up once, it's a one-time cost. Then it keeps on running for years and years. Sure, you do a bit of maintenance here and there, but that's worth it. I mean, you do the same thing at coal energy plants also. So here's the untapped opportunity. So as you can see towards the south, where Sri Lanka and India are quite close, so that's a strait out there you have. So a strait is a very good place to generate electricity, and also the best part is if you're quite to Sri Lanka, this can be a joint initiative between both the governments to set up a power plant out there, tidal energy plant. Both can invest and both can benefit from it. Let's start on biofuel. Not that good. It's still better than coal, but yeah, let's work on this. So current policy, which is in India, so we are trying to, by 2030, the government wants to achieve blending biofuels with fossil fuels. The ratio for that is 20% of biofuels will be combined with 80% of fossil fuels for production of electricity by combustion. This is not good enough. We need to really decrease fossil fuels. So India has a very high biofuel capacity, especially in the villages. I'll just explain that further down. So there's a scope of set up a large scale biofuel plants in villages to availability of raw materials. So this is the best part. Raw materials are freely available in villages. I mean, the best raw materials are crop cutting. You have a lot of farms in villages. People are growing things, they're cutting, they're harvesting. You have a lot of plant residue and remains lying around. We can use that quite well. Household organic waste is okay there. And cattle manure. This is also quite helpful and is highly abundant in villages. People must have seen. So another benefit of this is providing employment in villages. So when you set up a biofood plant in villages, people need to work out there. People need to work there. So you're providing employment. The major problem with biofuel is that it's not a carbon-free source of energy and not sustainable in the long run. So 100 years from now, you can't really rely on biofuel, but for 30 years from now, you can definitely rely on biofuel, and you should really use biofuel to start phasing out coal. So, like I said, the carbon emission of biofuel is quite less than that of coal, so it can act as an alternative to coal to reduce carbon emissions. Another benefit of biofuel is that the raw material of biofuel are usually burnt, especially the plant remains lying around after harvesting, which causes a major carbon emission, which can be reduced drastically if you convert it to biofuel and then burn the fuel. So that's something to keep in mind. Algae biofuel, this is one of my favorite topics out here. I know algae biofuel technically is a part of biofuel, but this is a separate topic and you see why. So, first thing about algae biofuel, it's not only limited to coastal regions where you can freely find algae. Algae can be grown artificially, like lakes, ponds, rivers, etc. for biofuel production. You can set up large-scale biofuel plants and algae biofuel plants and it can work. So, best part. So, two components are required for algae biofuel: algae farm and biofuel farm. Let me show you an example. This is a large-scale biofuel plant, algae biofuel plant. People are growing algae quite effortlessly, you can say almost, and then using it to make biofuel. It's quite beneficial to us. So, algae biofuel helps remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The way this works is that algae, being a plant, takes in carbon dioxide and gives out oxygen. Quite beneficial for us, right? Upon combustion, less carbon emission than coal, just like with normal biofuel. A major scope of setup of plants along coasts, rivers, ponds, lagoons, backwaters, villages, etc. Villages, like I explained before, biofuel plants can be set up. Algae farms can be set up in villages, in the ponds and all, and that algae can be used in the normal biofuel plants also. So it's beneficial to us. A reduction in water acidification. This is quite beneficial to us. We should really take advantage of this and work on this. So the way this basically works is that the ocean absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Algae absorbs carbon dioxide from the ocean. So you set up more algae, and this is not only for ocean, for all water bodies technically. So you put up a lot of algae in proper algae, like the algae that are beneficial to us in these water bodies, and it starts taking in carbon dioxide, starts absorbing carbon dioxide, which results in less acidification of water. So, according to a study by the University of Washington, St. Louis, if I'm not wrong, Washington, let's go with that. So, when they set up an algae farm, so the water acidification in the algae farm region decreased by 40%, and in the surrounding region decreased by 20%. This is quite beneficial to us. This I'll explain in later video maybe, but yeah, it's quite beneficial to us. Then, right, the algae farm setups can also be used to produce algae for biofertilizers to help improve soil health without the use of chemical fertilizers. This is because these farms will produce a lot of algae which might not be used in totally for biofuels. So, added benefit, as I explained. So, here are some ethical issues regarding the coal phase out. The biggest ethical dilemma regarding the coal phase out is the loss of jobs for people working in the coal industry. So you're kind of getting this point. The industry employs people at all levels, people involved in coal mining, transportation, construction of coal power plants, operation of coal power plants, transportation of, construction of roads for transportation, and so on. It's a huge industry and it's connected to many other industries. So it's quite essential. It employs a lot of people. However, in a country like India, this is not that big of a problem because to remove coal from the market, large scale development is required. And other energy sources, most of the people employed in the coal industry can't find employment there. I mean, you're a construction worker, great. We still need to construct, I know, so many wind farms, solar farms, tidal farms, biofertilizer plants, so not biofertilizer, biofuel plants, and so on. And this is quite important. We need you. You won't be working on coal power plants, no problem, dude. Just come here and work on this power plant. That's how this works, right? The only people who might not benefit much on this is that this done work out for is people who are involved in mining specifically and are like mining engineers and petroleum engineers and so on. But these people can shift on to petroleum or maybe minerals, some other mineral mining. So this is not that big of an issue, I personally feel, since alternative jobs can be provided for everyone. So some people might be wondering out here that why I did not include hydroelectricity in my presentation. That's why hydroelectricity, though being a renewable source of energy, has a lot of problems due to which it's not that viable. Of course, it has a major cost of setup, which is a major problem for us. Setting up hydroelectricity plants can provide a lot of cost issues. That they have maintenance problems, and their chance of flooding if the dam tends to break and all, and the corrosion. It has to reinforce again and again. This is a major problem due to which it's not economically beneficial to us in the long run. Plus, a major problem with setting up hydroelectric plants is it leads to loss of biodiversity, and people tend to get moved on a lot, loss of habitation for people living in the surrounding areas. So, loss of habitat, let's just talk on that for 2 minutes. So, one of the biggest thing that happens is habitat fragmentation when you set up a power plant, hydroelectric power plant. But then a lot of the aquatic life tends to get stuck in the turbines and all of your hydroelectric power plants, which is not very beneficial. So, just trying to address that issue before it comes up. So thank you so much for attending this presentation, guys. Know, I know a lot of you will be having questions and all. So whoever has whatever questions, put it down in the comments of my video, and I will get back to you individually. Also, if I tend to get a lot of comments and a lot of questions regarding coal phase out in India, so I will make a part 2 of the video addressing all of your questions. So feel free to question me, guys. Thank you.